Okay, guys, welcome to Carroll College's pre-medical club meeting. I believe this is number 16. It's probably wrong. This is the part 2 of the pre-hospital versus hospital medicine. So insight into more of the clinical occupations that your officers have held. So today will be as follows. We're going to start with some opening messages and a COVID-19 case report as usual. We will have a few other introductory messages as well. And then we're going to get into emergency department scribing for the first part, then mental health technician for the second part, followed by wildland firefighting and search and rescue for the third part. We'll speak about our next meeting really quickly, and then we'll have some closing remarks.
All right, so for the opening message, as you all are already familiar with, we like to inform, excite, empower, and involve each and every one of you guys. And at the start of the semester, it kind of prompted 2 questions, and this is something to keep in mind throughout the entirety of the semester, and also this meeting and future meetings is, why am I here and why should I care? And with all this information that we're providing and these experiences, it just all connects with the IEEI, with the inform, excite, empowering involvement of each and every one of you guys to ask questions and seek out these opportunities. For the COVID-19 community update, since our last meeting update, there's been an increase in total cases from 97,995 to 98,779 in Montana. County numbers have currently decreased by 26 from our last meeting. Total deaths increased by 8 in the state of Montana, with 2 being reported from Lewis and Clark County.
Ton, do you want to talk about your spreadsheet? Can you hear me?
Sure, yeah.
Pulling it up.
Yeah. Go ahead. And I'm Ton, I'm the pre-med advisor. And I created this spreadsheet just to help out the people that are looking at medical schools. And I plan on updating it on the regular basis on like what requirements are needed for medical schools. How does your MCAT and GPA look at certain things? So if you can go up really fast, let's say you have a 3.5 GPA or lower. So if she can click that, if you could hit on enable it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. Right, and then you put like your MCAT score would be what, like a 505, we'll say, right? So let's say you just took your MCAT score, you look at your GPA. These are the type of schools that you should be looking at to be like super competitive. Like, okay, I have a 3.5 GPA, I score a 501. Maybe I should apply to the Arkansas College of Osteopathic Medicine, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can just play around with it. So like if she clicked on a 3.8 GPA or lower, you can see that you have more schools. You see like what MCAT scores you go to. So this is just part of what I plan on building for you guys and helping you guys out on what schools you might qualify for in the future. So that's, yeah. And if you need anything else for me, like, hey, it'd be really cool if you can do this, if you can do that. I'm really great with like computer programming. I'm really great with Excel sheets. So like any ideas you have, just let me know and I'll build it up and make it easier for you guys to look up like medical schools and whatnot.
Perfect. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
There we go. Yes, it is.
Okay, and then additionally, I brought up that there was an opportunity for vaccinations if eligible. And with that, there's also, I recommend seeing updates on the Lewis and Clark County Public Health COVID-19 hub that they actually have online to see if you're eligible. And they have more information provided there.
So really quick, Save the Brain is an organization I've been volunteering for since my freshman year. And we do baseline concussion screening for Helena youth. So that way, if they get hurt on the field and they go to the emergency room, they have a baseline concussion test. If you are interested in getting trained on how to perform baseline concussion screenings, please contact Emily Stefan. Her email address is here, and I'm happy to email that to you if you want. You can email me as well. She's trying to set up a training at Carroll for Save the Brain to come and train people, and they usually do that once a year. So it's a pretty great opportunity, and usually twice a year they do concussion screening events.
Any questions about any of those things, you can ask us after the meeting. But otherwise, we're gonna get into it now. So you guys are gonna see some really weird clip art throughout the presentation. Just a heads up. Anyway, like I said, we're gonna begin. Joey's gonna lead us through emergency department scribing. Michael and Amber will take over with mental health technician. And then me, Taylor, and Alyssa virtually, we're gonna go through search and rescue and wildland firefighting as well. So without further ado, Joey, the presentation that mine went over last week.
Yeah, so I was supposed to pick up right after Becky Bolognese has had her cardiac incident at her home. And so I was gonna pick up right where while we get a call. So we're sitting in the ER as a scribe. You're sitting at this little computer that's kind of on this portable desk, and you have a stool, and it's usually pretty uncomfortable for your back and whatever. But you hear this beep, beep, beep in the middle of the rotund that is the ER, and it tells you that there's Eagle Medical Services en route to somebody's house. And so right when you're doing that, typically the doctor is going to go and talk to the charge nurse and say, hey, so what's going on at the scene? How's the patient doing, whatever, and then she's going to give them the full synopsis of this patient is having a cardiac incident, whatever, and her name is Becky, blah, blah, blah. And so the scribe's job is to be listening in on that conversation. The doctor's not going to tell you to listen into it. They're just going to be having the conversation, and it's your job to listen in. And so you're going to get the patient's name, and you're immediately going to go into your scribing thing, and where you fill out the chart. And I forgot what it's called. What is it called?
The HPI.
Well,
The EHR, Meditech.
The
Meditech. You go into Meditech and you find the patient's name, and then you open up a file for them. That is then going to be their scribe sheet that you fill out for the rest of their visit. And you immediately go into finding their history. And so typically with somebody that's a cardiac patient like Becky, you're going to find stuff like she has hypertension, or she is morbidly obese or something like that, or she has a history of heart attacks, which it'll under past medical history, it'll be under myocardial infarctions instead of heart attacks, which is sometimes a hard thing to find.
Joey, really quick before you go on. In order to promote interactiveness today, we have established 3 Kahoots after each single presentation. We encourage you guys to go on your phones, and including the people on Zoom as well, and perform these Kahoots, and whoever gets the highest score on all 3 will receive prizes. So an incentive to pay attention.
Yeah.
Right. Like
And
a
then-
scribe would do.
So, and then your job when the patient arrives is pretty much to listen and watch. Oh, wait, hang on. So after you've found the past medical history of this patient, they're usually going to pick a room to have the patient arrive in, especially if it's a very critical patient. This differs for when you're just working a day-to-day as a scribe, where patients arrive and you're sitting next to the doctor and they're saying, okay, we have a new patient in room 5 and they're a psych patient. We're going in there right now and you don't have time to prep. But if it's a critical patient, you usually have time to prep. And so they'll say that patient, usually a heart attack patient goes into room 6 or 7, right? Goes into room 6 or 7, and then you'll walk in there before the patient arrives, and there will be nurses running around grabbing intubation tubes and all the supplies that they need to take care of this person when they arrive. And your job is pretty much to pick a spot that's completely out of the way, but at the same time, you're not completely disconnected from the situation to both not hear, or if they need extra sheets or something, that's one of the jobs that falls upon scribes. Now, under previous employment, there was, you weren't allowed to touch the patient as a scribe, but currently, if you work at the ER, you're technically allowed to touch the patient, but only under directive of the doctor typically, or the PA that's working under you, which is a super cool thing that's happening right now. And so the whole time, your job, while this patient arrives in the ER, she's receiving compressions from typically, I forgot what the
Lucas.
device.
Lucas.
Yes, the Lucas device that looks like this little rectangle that's above them and has this like punch.
It's like a giant suction cup.
Yep, it's just pumping their heart the whole time. And I've seen it probably twice in the 2 years that I worked as an ER scribe. But that happens, and then they remove that device and boom, you're in the emergency room, everything's moving really quickly, but you're sitting there and you're watching the doctor the whole time. So you're watching the doctor, whatever they're saying, typically they'll direct one of the nurses to give some sort of medication or something at some amount and at some
2
concentration.
milligrams of epi
Yep. they'll
every
say something
3
like that.
minutes.
And so they'll say like 2 milligrams of epi, and the charge nurse will walk over to the whiteboard and write 2 milligrams of epi at like 16:45 or whatever time that they applied it in military time. And as the scribe, you're watching this whole thing, and not only are you recording what they're giving the patient, but you're also recording what the doctor's doing at exactly the same time that the doctor's doing it. And not necessarily are those notes going to go into the whole like chart work that's going to be the record of the doctor for the rest of their life, but it's going to be when the doctor at the end of the day or a couple days later is writing their medical decision making or what exactly to them happened during that time, they're going to look at your notes and they're going to record that. So if your notes are really shitty, like they're going to directly blame you for that, which they do often, but they do it nicely. But at the same time, they have a good memory too. So sometimes they remember details that you don't remember. And so that's your job the whole time, is to listen and watch. And like when I was a scribe, I felt like the rat of the ER. Like you're the lowest of the lows when you're in the ER. Whatever they tell you to do, you do. And whatever they don't tell you to do, you still do. So now, after everything's happened and the patient is stable and whatever's happening in the ER is happening, the nurses are still working. It's your job to then go get the story of what you're going to write about. So the whole job of the scribe is to write a story, and you're making the story of the patient. And it's not, sometimes people conflate it to, as a scribe, you're there to vindicate the doctor and what the doctor did. But at the same time, you're also there to support the patient. Like whatever you write down is the patient's story. So it's your job to then, once the doctor's done getting everything done in the ER that he has to do or she has to do, you follow them out, and Becky's parents or Becky's daughter is sitting outside the emergency room because she can't be in there because it's too busy. And you have to get the story from her, and whatever she says is the story, as far as you know. And the story from the patient is usually pretty difficult to decipher what you need to write down. And that's something that's extremely crucial to being a doctor. And also one of the things that's outlined in the cars section is to be able to, you're reading through a large amount of material. And it's the same thing that you're getting from the patient. The patient will tell you, okay, I went to the grocery store at 2 o'clock today, and I honestly didn't feel very well. And then I went to my aunt's house, and then I went to my sister's house. And then she told me about her dog that's also sick, which I think I might've got sick from that. Then I'm also like kind of lactose intolerant, which I kind of want you to check out. And then they finally get to the details that really matter about what their condition is right now. And it's your job as a physician and also as the scribe, which is a great thing because you're kind of playing the doctor, kind of, is to pick out the essential details from those conversations. Because you're going to hear on an average day, it's usually like 9-hour shifts. They tell you 9-hour shifts, but you end up working probably like 10 or 11 shifts, 10 or 11-hour shifts. But they tell you that you'll probably see on average 17 patients a day. So that's 17 different extremely unique stories of people that genuinely believe that their story is extremely important to what condition brought them to the ER. So it's your job as a scribe and also as a doctor later on to decipher what details are extremely important about that. And the doctor is going to direct them through the conversation because usually they're there for the same purpose that you are, to listen in on the patient, find out what's wrong, and then try and fix what they can about what's wrong at that moment. So the next one is the chart. So within St. Peter's ER, the chart is through Meditech, which then other hospitals, if this patient went out of state or something, could then go to that hospital and be documented, and it would go into this thing called Meditech. And you can find out why they went there, when they went there, for what did they like come in as, what was their chief complaints, or what was their diagnosis, where did they go after, if they got discharged to a oncology clinic or a burn clinic or the ICU or something like that. So you fill out a lot of major things about them. As the scribe, you fill out the HPI, which is a history of present illness. And the hardest thing about the whole chart is the story. So you say something like, patient is a 64-year-old female. She presents the ED. In Becky's case, you would say she presents the ED unconscious. And then from there, the rest of the history is either from the EMS provider or from the patient's family or something like that. So you say per EMS provider, they said patient was unconscious on the floor upon arrival. She was cachectic, she had no heartbeat, all that jazz. And then the thing that you filled out while the EMS was en route was the PMHX, which is the past medical history. And that's the list of this person has hypertension, diabetes, she's obese, she has a history of myocardial infarctions, she had 3 stents in 2008, something like that. All those things extremely important to the doctor. The past medical history is one of the most important things to fill out. The HPI, not so much, because the HPI is also comparable to the MDM, which the medical decision-making of the doctor. It's usually the part of the chart that the doctor writes. And sometimes the scribe has to, the doctor will, you're seeing a lot of patients all day and they're really busy, and they'll speak into this thing called Dragon, where whatever you say into this machine, it prints it right onto the piece of paper. And so usually you have to go in and proofread it and verify that the details are correct and whatever to the most that you know upon the notes that you took. And so the MDM is usually deferred by the HPI. And then the ROS is the review of systems. And this one's one of the easier ones to fill out upon the chart. It's like a bunch of, you have coughing, fever, headache, nausea, vomiting, like all the systems you can pretty much think of are all in this little chart, and you pick whether yes or no, or check HPI, which sometimes like a symptom can be a little bit more complicated that is then described within the HPI. And when somebody's looking through it, they can then refer to the HPI if you clicked it. And then the dispo is whether or not they moved, like, it's pretty much, is this patient stable? Yes or no? Is this patient, their condition upon arrival is also goes within there. And then where they went after they were treated. Like, did they go to the ICU? Did they leave the hospital? Were they referred to a different hospital? And all that stuff are things that you have to document the whole time. And not only in addition to all these things you have to fill out, you also have to fill out whether the patient like was visited by the doctor during the whole stay. So if you're just sitting there on your phone and it seems like the doctor is just relaxing or the doctor goes to the bathroom, you're watching the doctor go. And whether they're like about to dip into somebody else's room, they're not going to tell you, but you just have to watch because they're kind of dickheads, but at the same time, they're just going to do their job and whatever. And so they're going to go visit the patient, and it's your job to record the time that they visit the patient. And when they come back, you have to ask them, hey, how's the patient doing? Like, do you want me to record a checkup? And that's something that you also have to record. So it's a lot of writing and it's a lot of watching, but at the same time, the whole time, you're completely absorbing everything. And you have to record every procedure that they do. So the patient that is Becky might be intubated. And so you have to record the size of the intubation tube, when the intubation happened, how far the tube went down in their throat, which the doctor will estimate for you. You just have to ask all of these details. You just have to ask the doctor, but you have to record all of them and print them into a template that they give you. But you do have to fill it out kind of like something that you would do for like biology when they give you a template for filling out what you did for the procedure, like 6 milliliters of buffer or whatever. And then the other thing that honestly is my favorite part is imaging, where you get to look at the patient's x-rays, their MRIs, their EKGs, their everything about them physically, you get to see. And that's the coolest thing about the job, definitely, is being able to see all of the images, the x-rays. But at the same time, you also have to record those and put them into the document for the doctor. And then a sample HPI, this is something that looks like something you'd write. So a 60-year-old female prescribed Coumadin, which is a blood thinner with a history of hypertension, heart disease, and previous MIs, myocardial infarction, presents to the ED via EMS, unconscious. According to the doctor, 45 minutes prior to arrival, the patient was cooking dinner and fell to the floor, experiencing a loss of consciousness. So sometimes you can use abbreviations. That is a lot of the studying that you'll do for if you want to be a scribe. You have to remember like 150 abbreviations or something like that. And pretty much the big test that you do is over those abbreviations, which you end up not really using, but you'll definitely know a lot of medical terminology. But the daughter contacted EMS and remained by the patient until their arrival. Per EMS, the patient was unconscious, supine, and in the kitchen upon arrival with no clear evidence of head trauma, cervical spine damage, or other contusions. These are all details that you'll acquire from the patient. So the patient's going to be like, okay, I walked into the kitchen and she was just lying on her back, and the doctor's going to say, was there any blood on the floor? Did she seem like her neck was like broken or anything? Blah, blah, blah. And the patient's going to be like, no, but you as the scribe have to put it into words like the patient was unconscious, supine on her back, and in the kitchen upon arrival with no clear evidence of head trauma. Those are things you have to check off. Head trauma, cervical spine damage, definitely something to check off. Or the contusions, and a contusion is just like a bruise, a cut, anything really, or a lesion. You can also use lesion. The patient was responsive to painful stimuli over the sternum. That's just a good sternum rub. One of the things that you should do, but also not do at the same time. And manual CPR was given for 20 minutes until the patient became stable. You guys all did that. For transport, stated by the daughter, the patient has not had an accident precipitating to the ED in approximately 2 years. So that's also some history that you can acquire from the past medical history or from the patient's daughter, sorry. So sample past medical history, depression, colitis, chronic hip pain, herpes zoster, fractured left first metatarsal, all that stuff. Usually the lists are really long for a lot of people that come into the ER. And sometimes they're really short and sometimes they have nothing in them. And you have to, sometimes as a scribe, you add things into their past medical history, which kind of makes you feel like a doctor sometimes. But so this is kind of what I was elaborating on. You have to stay vigilant the whole time that the patient's in the ER. If there's a hospitalist to come, they're going to go to the ER or something, or the ICU. You have to watch for the person that's going to come admit them, and you have to record the time that they come. You have to record consultations with other physicians. They might call like University of Utah if it's a burn patient typically, and you have to record that. Or they might call an oncologist, or they might call the patient's family doc in I don't know, South Dakota or something. Yep. There we go. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you have a phone with you, we're gonna go ahead and
rehearsal?
do
Yes.
the
Enjoy.
All right, I gotta go. Thanks, guys.
Joey, is this your wallet?
No, it's mine.
Okay, never mind.
That's the cool thing about being a scribe is that you get to actually like know what happens to the patient, the history of the patient. EMS is always burning, what happens to them. Their history.
Or if you work on the floor, you really get to know what happens to the patient
That's true.
until they transfer to a bigger hospital.
Is this sharing this too? Good.
Yep. However, yeah,
Yeah, okay, sweet.
We really encourage you guys to join in on these cahoots and do well because
There are an incentive of
Yep.
cookies from Great Harvest.
and the first place winner of the cahoots will be able to decide a meeting for us to cover. You get a meeting topic for yourself. You speak to us and Marjorie will give you a custom meeting, whatever you like. That includes people on Zoom as well.
Yes.
I don't know why I'm talking louder, but yeah.
Okay, give it another 30 seconds. Maybe less.
is everyone on Kahoot?
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. We're gonna start.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't read through any of this because I was at work.
Nice, yes, it's correct. It is. Attention.
Taylor, I don't know if you count for this.
All right. What does PTA stand for? Awesome. You guys are rocking it. It's gonna be tricky. We have a tiebreaker. All right. Nice job, Taylor. Okay, what does MI stand for? I'm not question. Awesome. You guys are rocking it. It's almost like you just took notes. All right. What does AMA stand for?
It sounds for I have a headache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This.
No, we're talking about AMA.
Uh,
There's people giving headaches.
Nice job.
That one was a little
So
difficult.
it stands for against medical advice, and that's just when a patient's leaving when they have not been discharged by a provider.
Okay. Nice. Got some people moving up. What does ASA stand for? Remember, cookies on the line.
You should have brought me one.
We'll have one.
It stands for aspirin.
Acetylsalicylic acid.
Yeah. Common name. All right. Switching up on the boards.
Did you get that wrong?
What does LOC stand for? Nice. All right. Our podium. That is our podium.
Mhm.
Sarah?
Sarah's third on that.
Huh? Nice.
Um,
We're gonna,
5547 5, 3, 4,
Oh,
6.
Yeah, for
Or
each.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have a lot of prizes.
Oh.
So Sophie will get the first cookie. And a few more. We
For
have
the
a few more
choice of the
sessions.
meeting, I'm gonna record them. and
Yeah.
get some
Okay.
votes.
Perfect, okay. Then back. Don't look at the answers. I don't think they're up there. If not, they're all up there. Oh, it says that. Okay. Sweet.
Yep.
Good.
All right. For the clip part. Good, Nancy. Okay, so next session is regarding being a mental health tech at Shodair Children's Hospital. And with me today, grateful to share this stand with Amber. She's also a mental health tech at Shodair Children's Hospital. So just to start off really quick, at Shodair, there's 4 units. 2 are residential and 2 are acute. The 2 that are residential, it just is in relation to the length of stay there for the children. Residential ones are Glacier and Yellowstone, whereas the acute, so the shorter term stay, are Grassland and High Desert. So moving on, if the kids, again, if like the kids want to leave, if they can provide the therapist staff with a safe plan, they're able to. And also, before we get into the schedule, staff, so both Amber and I had to go through like a 1 or 2 week formal training before we actually, in orientation, before we actually started working. So one of the core components of being a mental health tech is you're there for the kids. And so that means, I guess what we have implemented is like a 15-minute check every 15 minutes. And generally there's a couple or a handful of mental health techs there, and we hand off the checks while the others might be coordinating the activity that they may be doing. And some of the shifts that I work are D4 and D12, and that's just in relation to like day 4 hours or day 12 hours. And so like a D4 would start at, I arrive at 6:15 in the morning and clock in, receives a report from the nurse with with the rest of the team, and we do a check-in. Often after that, when we get onto the milieu, which is the common area, there are 2 teams that are broken up. And so just to allow for most amount of attention for the kids, so we break them up into 2 teams. And typically we have, as you can see, like Friday, Saturday, the weekend and the weekday schedules kind of change. But one team has hygiene, the other team would have breakfast, and it flips. And then after is like life skills, and we can help facilitate that, which is like doing hair, nails, or writing, or an activity such as crafts in the morning. Then is community. And it's a great component that's in the schedule because all the kids and staff are kind of gathered together in the morning. And let's say it's the beginning of the week, on Mondays, what we would do is we would do our check-ins, but additionally, we kind of set up our goals for the week that we would aim for, and also just assess how we had done the previous week with that goal as a unit. And those are typically more on the residential units. So I believe Amber, you work on, we both work on the Glacier unit as our home unit, but I've kind of floated around, I'm sure Amber has as well, on different units. After a community, in that meeting, we would go into, like, we would have them ready and lined up for the teachers to come in, and they would be able to go, they would be going to school. And typically that's where a D4 shift would end, but just elaborating a little more on the D12, the kids you would continue to spend time with, and you'd have that 15 minutes checks, and you would move back to the milieu, the common area of the unit. And then they'd be transitioned to either rec therapy, which is another staff that would come in, or lunch, and you are kind of helping this transition with these groups throughout the day. And the rec therapy could include like gym, basketball, or group activities such as crafts. And the kids would return to school after lunch, transition to a process group, which is often led by the therapist, and where they would do a group check-in to see if there was any troubles that had arose in the previous weeks. And then at the end of our shifts, we often chart the activities, their participation, INOs, emotional state, goals, and anything alarming, we would notify the nurse. And the EMR system that we use at Shodare is Epic. And with that, Amber, I think you work the E12s and
I work
E4s.
like a lot of E4, so it's kind of like the opposite of a D4, kind of like help them get there, go to report, kind of help them like wind down. That consists of like doing a craft or like watching a movie, playing a game sometimes, but then you're really there for them to get ready for bed and like help them. Maybe they like had a bad conversation on the phone, like you're there for them to talk them through it. And then you're also unlocking their bathroom so they can use the bathroom, take a shower. Sometimes if they're like a little more like not dangerous, but if they're like on SP1 or SP2, that means like suicide prevention. And so then you're with them while they're in the bathroom, while they're taking a shower, and you're really just there for them, helping them wind down, take their medication, and then eventually go to sleep. So that's kind of what I do at an E4. E12 is like just all night. You're there while they're sleeping, and it's a little more relaxed because usually they stay asleep. But also some like worse things can happen when they're sleeping, and so there's always people, mental health techs there for them if they need someone to talk through something or anything like that. And they also are there until the D4 and D12 MHTs get in.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think there's also knock shifts, which are those nights as well. But I have never worked one. I don't think I will, just because I have to stay up and also do exams the next day. But moving along, like such things that we implement or in our training, we implement like Rumble language, and it's an opportunity to really learn someone else's perspective and gain insight, understanding of their view, even if you don't agree with it. And I actually found this to be incredibly useful outside of Shodare, but of course within Shodare. And some scenarios I had were I had the kids during the morning. They would, for breakfast, always want like 2 or 4 sugar packets with their cereal. And often what we do is they would say, oh, well, the other staff let us do that, so how come you don't? And I just try to keep a couple of these or a handful of these in my mind to kind of redirect and shift the focus and work with them. And so I'm not giving them, let's say 4, but I might give them 1 per bowl or 2 if they're just having 1 bowl. And then another scenario I've had was, let's say a kid had on the unit being residential, so Glacier, had got discharged. So one of them had left. And the other kids they were really close to that kid that got discharged. And so I would sit with them and just talk with them just to open up about how they're feeling about that individual leaving, because sometimes they feel like that's their support system. And it's important to let them know that we're also there to support them.
Mm-hmm. And like a lot of these situations are maybe like you're being more of like a person, like a role model there for them, kind of just like talking them through things. And like a lot of things like happen because they are really close, and then one of them has to leave, and they have a lot of sometimes drama between their friend groups. But yeah, this Rumble language is really helpful, such as like I had a patient once who like had a terrible phone call, stormed into their room, slammed the door, like kind of chased after them, asked them, like I said, like, tell me more, like, help me understand what you're going through, what happened in the phone call, like, can you walk me through things? And then it just like really helps the conversation flow because you're really there just to listen. And so you're not going to be giving a ton of advice. You're really just there for them and to listen to them and just walk them through what's going on. And then, so CPI and NCI are like, and de-escalation are the techniques that we mainly use as an MHT. And CPI is crisis prevention intervention and NCI is non-crisis intervention. So CPI is basically like when you have to do a resuscitation or seclusion. And so this is when the patient has escalated to the point where they're like dangerous to others or themselves, and you must like perform a resuscitation, and you use your team members, like 4 people, to help get them resuscitated, get them calmed down. And that usually is like more of a physical aspect of being an MHT. And then the de-escalation is what you're trying to do to prevent this from happening. So like your therapeutic techniques to talk them not out of it, but like to just talk them through what's happening and try and get them to calm down before they are like dangerous to others or dangerous to themselves.
Yeah, and to add to that, something I want to highlight is on the left side, these are just like directly from a packet from our training. And so I think it's really useful to see the staff attitudes and approaches in conjunction with the behavior levels. 1 being supportive, so you're there, and 2 is directive, kind of allowing them to know what our rules, like the rules are we kind of have in place, but also allow them to have some power. Physical intervention is often one of the last means that we have. And then therapeutic rapport is, I guess, like after the scenario, and we kind of work through that together. Other things and other components that I'd like to highlight for non-crisis intervention are like nonverbal communication. And so that can be like with your posture or your proximity and position with the individual. That often tends to help. And I think that's something we don't think about too often. And what I found to be incredibly helpful, I learned this, was just standing like side by side when you're having a conversation instead of like one up like straight in front of them. That often enables a more comfortable situation and allows it to be a more like the conversation to flow easier. Other things to keep in mind are like paraverbal and verbal communication. And so this can be whether your sound level of your words are like higher in tone or lower in tone, and where you emphasize things when you're speaking to them. Other things, as I included, physical intervention is often our last means, but if you have to engage that, it often disengagement skills, like shifting a punch away. And then, of course, there's physical interventions such as restraints or holding skills. But, and then additionally, just to highlight really quickly, the coping model, which is control, orient, patterns, investigate, and negotiate and give. And for sake of time, I'm going to refrain from going through each one of those to allow our other speakers tonight. But if you had any additional questions after the Kahoot, we'd be happy to answer them. So with that, we'll go to the Kahoot really quick, and then. Okay.
How far away is you there?
It's actually really close to St. Peter's. Like,
Yeah.
it's basically down the
It's
block.
right next to St.
Mhm.
It's like right behind St. Peter's.
So I try to leave the house 15 minutes, but sometimes 9 minutes I get there. I'd say 15 minutes is good.
Good talk
Yeah.
about it.
I get really lucky with the lights, so that's probably.
I leave work at 6:10. I'm due at 6:30, but I
Yeah.
like to walk in at 6:23 when walk ins.
Anyone on Zoom, or I guess do we have everyone who wants to be in Kahoot and participate on this one? I'll give it a couple more seconds.
Are we good?
All good? All right, let's start. What is the third approach in a CPI situation?
Game changer.
Oh, yeah. No, awesome, yes. We tend to not use physical intervention if we absolutely can do something else, but it is the third approach. All right. In what situation would you use rumble language? That's correct. Yes, that's awesome, guys. You can definitely use it.
Do you use rumble language with Andrew?
Yeah. Shoot. No, I'm kidding.
You and your roommate have an argument?
Does all make sense?
Yeah, I know, right? That's
I'm like
worked
trying to
out.
think about our meetings.
What is not
now.
true about Shredder? I told you.
This is nice to hear about Michael, in addition to being a medical.
Yeah, that's right. If they can provide a safe plan after they leave Shredder, they're able to leave. All right, nice job, Matt. On a roll. Okay, fourth question. What is the common area called on the unit? That's right, the milieu. Nice job. Okay, nice job. True or false? Glacier unit and grassland are both residential units. So it's 50-50 split. So it's Glacier and Yellowstone are the residential units. And then high desert and grasslands are the cube. All right, last question. What EMR system does Shredder have? That'd be great. It's very just fun.
Right, yeah.
This entire town
Yeah,
needs to get on board and use Epic.
it is Epic. Yeah, so Epic is, yeah, so St. Peter's uses Meditech.
Meditech. St. Peter's is going to be transitioning to
Yes.
Epic, so they say, but they've been
But
saying that for
Shredder
the
uses
past
Epic.
3 years.
But nice job, everyone.
You know, it might happen in 3 more years.
Peyton, nice. And Ellie, there you go. Nice job. Okay. I will.
Wow, different names.
All right.
This is interesting.
Leave the floor and welcome.
Yes, Taylor, come down here. And is Alyssa on?
Yeah,
the
so
chat?
do you want to pull up
Yes.
Come on.
and make it Alyssa's face?
Oh, I think I heard her.
Don't do that. No one wants to see that.
So click the middle one. And then change it
I
to
know you had it.
Alyssa.
I'm gonna remove the pen and then,
There we
yeah, so
go.
it'll go to hers. Oh, there she is. All right. Okay, guys.
Nice.
So we're getting kind of close to the 8:30 limit, so if you gotta leave, I won't be offended. But this is gonna be a session on wilderness firefighting and search and rescue. Thank you, Michael, for the fire helmet.
Oh, yes, of course.
With me is Junior Officer President Taylor, and on Zoom is Alyssa Hurst, your Junior Officer Secretary. All right. Alyssa, do you want, we'll go wildland firefighting, then Taylor can take search and rescue, and then I'll chip in with some last minute details. So Alyssa, go for it.
All right. So the first thing that pretty much wraps up for me wildland firefighting is you're either hard at work or you're hardly working. There's some days where like you're up 1 o'clock in the morning fighting fire, or other days you're just like sitting around the yard just waiting for a fire to happen. You also make really good money because they pay for your food, they pay for your hotel room, so you're basically not spending any money while you're there. The only thing you have to purchase is your fire boots. And for training, you need to take a wildland firefighting course. I was able to do it in a weekend, but I think with COVID, they did an online platform that you had to be there like an hour for like a month or something like that. You also pass a fitness test. For at least wildland firefighters, like firefighter 1, which is what I was, you need to get a red card, which is basically you have 45 pounds on your back and you just have to walk 3 miles in 45 minutes. And you also gotta love the being outdoors, because if you don't like it, then wildland firefighting is not for you because you are outside most of the time.
All right, so I'll do a little overview for search and rescue. So search and rescue is obviously search and rescue organization, and their mission is so others may live. I don't know if that's the universal mission, but at least the Lewis and Clark County one, that's theirs. And then other things they keep in mind is like having integrity, courage, and compassion when they're helping find these patients. And then the search and rescue here is entirely volunteer. It's not paid at all, like all of the time. It's just on your own and you just show up when you can. You obviously have to meet certain requirements, but it's all volunteer. And then just like some words that I like to keep in mind is like, you have to have grit when you're doing the search and rescue because all the situations they can get really intense and you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable because you just don't really know what you're going to run into. You just kind of have to be prepared for everything and be able to kind of like keep calm and think straight when things are a little hectic.
Yeah. So both wildland firefighting and search and rescue, which I'm going to refer to as SAR for the rest of the presentation, they're controlled by ICS, which is the Incident Command System. This is devolved from FEMA, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, to ensure that safety, cost, and efficiency are all met. So all of this is connected through a unified chain of command. So let's say there's a fire in LA right now. What'll happen is California is going to call for mutual aid from surrounding local entities. So, oh, San Francisco, send units this way. That's going to happen. And so as this progresses, they're going to start to call more state entities in which they'll say, hey, Texas, can you come over here and help us? Texas probably can't help right now, but they're going to call Texas and say, hey, help. So now Texas is going to take their entities and head into that direction as well. And then they're also going to go on and say, okay, we have this list of people who are willing to help respond. They're going to get on the phone. They're going to say, okay, can you respond to this fire? And they're going to give you a 24-hour notice to get there. Yes. Okay, move on. And so that's what's going to happen with each volunteer person. This is how volunteer and private contractors get into the mix of things. I believe you can only work 14 days. I think you can extend it to 21 days once, but then you have to go home because they don't want you guys to burn out unless you are part of a hotshot group. And so what hotshots are, they work pretty much, they work 6 months out of the year. They go around, fight a bunch of fires all at once, and they take unemployment the rest of the year, even though they just made 80K, 90K, in about 6 months. So that's pretty much what happens with them. The major point is this. If Eagle Ambulance was called to respond to a fire and we showed up with our 2 ambulances, they would be a part of a camp, and then they're no longer our ambulances. They're just part of the whole grand scheme of things. That's how this thing goes. It's just a huge pooling of resources. SAR is the very same thing. They're usually very small instances that you're responding to, small search and rescue instances. You have general ICS at base, and then shit hits the fan and everything, it just goes up in the air, usually. And most SAR jobs are side jobs. They're usually not full-time, nor are they paid as well. So they are side job opportunities. And yes, they're mostly volunteer. Cool. Go for it, Alyssa.
Okay, you're kind of breaking up, so hopefully my internet isn't failing. But so some options how you can get involved in wildland firefighting. I originally wanted to go on as a medic. However, I applied so late in the season that you had to have firefighting background. So I was like, hey, you know what? I'll just go for it and become a wildland firefighter. So there's medics. There's also helicopter pilots, cooks, and administration, like the people who pretty much run the entire base camp. And there's also shots, like Andrew mentioned, they're kind of like, they are on like a whole nother level. They're like the most educated, I guess, out of the fire world. There's also the smoke jumpers who literally jump out of helicopters, and they are pretty cool to see. And then there's also like your regular ground firefighters, which is what I did for most of the summer.
All right, and then with search and rescue, this is just going off of what I know from the Lewis and Clark County SARS, is they pretty much have committees and then they have teams. And so what you do is they have like a general meeting once a month, and then within each committee or team, they have their own separate meetings. And so there's medical, training, property, communication, and the membership committee. And then I have more information on these, but I won't go into it right now. And then they also have the teams. So there's tech, man tracking. They have an ATV and a snowmobile, a boat team, a dive team, and then they have a wet team. So each team is pretty self-explanatory based on their name, and that pretty much is just like the equipment that they use. They kind of get separated into those categories just because you have to kind of have basic knowledge of like safety and how to operate them and how they work and things like that. But it's actually pretty cool. I didn't even know they had like a dive team until I went to one of their meetings. Like, oh, pretty cool.
Alyssa, how is that audio coming through?
I can hear you guys.
Okay, just checking. Yeah, so wildland firefighting, got a base camp set up. It can be as simple as having a table with some saline for people to clean out their eyes, to medevac helicopters. So pretty diverse. As far as SAR goes, you have to be very well versed in everything because, like Taylor said, there's this entire list of different opportunities you can pursue. Gallatin County actually has one of the best search and rescue teams, even though they're just a bunch of volunteers. They have one of the best search and rescue teams in the nation. And we'll get into that later. It's very diverse. So just like you can get deployed to a wildfire, you can get deployed to a hurricane or a tornado. There are a lot of opportunities. There's also canine entities. So there's about 6, maybe 7 certifications that it could get. And so if you want open water for your canine, for example, you literally put them on a boat and the dog has to direct you to the body plus or minus 3 feet away. And in a 40-acre body of water. So basically the only reason why you exist is because you're there to understand the dog. That's an option available as well. Okay.
So obstacles in wildland firefighting. First things to do is like prepare for the season off. Like you have to be physically fit because you're literally climbing up and down mountains all day with heavy packs and tools. Also to remember to apply early because most people apply in November for jobs, especially for the BLM and the Forest Service. And if you are any later than January, there's a chance that you can't get a job for the summer season. There is mental and physical exhaustion. Like you can imagine you're working, it's like 90 degrees outside. And then plus like you are up at weird hours. Like you can be up at 1 o'clock, go to bed at 4 for a couple hours and be right back at it again. One of the for me, any of you guys in ROTC greatest, they're like these pre-packaged meals that can last for 10 years. Not my cup of tea, depending. The chili's okay, but when you're living off those for 14 days, it's not always ideal. And you do work 14 days on, 2 days off. You can experience camp crud, which is kind of like the sickness that just goes around camp. Also, like you're in the smoke all day. So like people are just like hacking up these black globs from their lungs and their noses and can get pretty gross. And everyone stinks because you cannot, like there's some times where you can't shower for like literally 14 days. I was actually drenched by a helicopter, and you could tell that the water was from like some reservoir near cattle because everyone just smelled like cow poop for 5 days. So, yep, those are some of the obstacles in wildland firefighting.
Okay, so real quick, just some of the obstacles for search and rescue. I put down time management just because it's all volunteer, and so like you don't necessarily have a set schedule. So
the more free time you have, like the easier it is to get involved and things like that. But right now, like for me anyway, like I'm full time at Carroll, and so like I haven't really done a lot. I've done a little bit, but not a lot. So that's kind of hard to like, because you kind of have to find time to do the training and then do that, and then so that's just kind of hard to do that. But and then, like I said, like getting some of there is opportunities for everybody. If you don't have any training, you can help out a little bit, but like with time, you know, the more training you get, then the more you can help out. And like with that, you have to get certifications, and there's like kind of like a timeline, like they only offer classes like certain times, and so if you can't meet them, then you have to kind of push it off. And then I just said like weather and gear. So I think what happens is if you're on a team, then you can say, hey, I need this and this and this for gear, and then they'll supply it for you. But you have to make sure you get the order in, and then also like weather. Like I put this second picture in because you really have no idea, especially in Montana, what you're going to be going into.
I have nothing to add to that. Good job, you two. All right, opportunities.
So I work for the DNRC, which is the state of Montana. I chose the DNRC because I only had to work for like a month, and they're super flexible with your schedule. So like if you need to leave for like a family emergency, or for like you have family coming up, they're super flexible with that. The BLM, which is state, not state, is federal, and the Forest Service, they're also federal. They will pretty much take you for the entire summer, and they're not as flexible, but they do pay a little bit more. I know the BLM, they also like will take care of campgrounds in the area, and same with Forest Service. I think they do some like slash piles and stuff like that. There's also, you can also work for private firefighting companies, and there's also FEMA, which are kind of like higher up, and same with WCG, and the BIA is kind of like the American Wildland Firefighting. And one that I forgot to add was the CMR, which is kind of like, it's on like, those are for like wildland fighting. It is like they will normally go fight those. However, for some reason, they don't take people. So that was interesting. But if you are looking for any jobs in wildland firefighting, please do not hesitate to get a hold of me.
Okay.
All right, so for SAR, for Lewis and Clark, they meet every third Thursday of the month over at 2700 Valley Drive, and that's kind of near East Helena at 7. So all of our meetings are at 7:30 on Thursdays, but maybe during the summer, I don't know, maybe we'll have a meeting off or something. It's all you do is if you just show up, then it's kind of cool. All you have to do is you just show up, you go in, you sit in on their meetings, they talk, they'll give you information and kind of like walk you through introductory. If you want to become a member, you just have to go to 3 meetings. It doesn't have to be in a row or anything, just 3 in general, and then you turn in an application. It's pretty easy. So their next one would be March 18th if anyone's interested. And then a really great resource is if you Google it, their website has like pretty much nothing, but if you go on their Facebook page, they actually will upload like updates on like any missions they've done, like, oh, hey, we went and did this, or we pulled this guy out of here, or we found this car in whatever, like the river or something. So Facebook's like kind of out of date right now, but if you have Facebook, they have a lot of information on there if anyone's interested in that.
Yep, so usually wildland firefighting positions are advertised October through December, and hiring season is January through March. So you want to think about applying September to October. With search and rescue, a lot of it's volunteer. They're relying on whatever the community can offer. So if you want to see something cool, look up Gallatin County Search and Rescue on Facebook. They have some money. So it's pretty cool, pretty badass. They're just phenomenal people as well. The number one thing to sum up about both of these experiences, that it is all very political. So it's all governmentally ran. You have to understand that there is a politic behind it. And while they want to help people, there's a cost, there's a safety, and there's a logistical aspect as well. It's not just you call the helicopter and it shows up. For example, in Great Falls, there was a fire, and the guy who was IC at the time, incident commander, the fire could have been handled by mutual aid. But the guy who was IC at the time freaked out and called in 2 B-50 bombers from Canada to drop water on it. Each of those runs about 6 figures. And so for a fire that could have been covered by mutual aid, now you have this entire large sums of money. So there's a lot of politics involved, a lot of money into it. Incident command has come a long way since disasters like Katrina. Before then, you'd literally have fire or Forest Service in the county sitting up on a hilltop, watching the fire from below blaze on, and just like arguing over who's going to pay for it based off of where the fire is at in the fence lines. The point where the fire would then just get out of control, and then it wouldn't even matter anyway. Things are better now, not entirely better, but they're getting there. And so these are actually some of probably the greatest opportunities you can have to spice up your resume and discover a lot more about yourself. So I encourage you guys to reach out to the junior officers about more information about it. Otherwise, from there, we'll go on to the Kahoot. Michael.
Can I say one?
Yes, you can, Zeke.
You can go onto FEMA's website and do the ICS, which is Incident Command System courses. And it really, really, helps to understand how all of that works. I think lots of them are free. So if you have the time to do it, it's just online. And it's really, I had to do it, but I went back on after and just did a bunch of others, just because it makes you, what they did was make it to where, the person who has the most courses in the ICS system is higher up, and so it could be the fire chief of this certain county, who's the highest, in that case, the incident commander, but it makes you more valuable to it. Should an incident come up, you'll be higher up. It gives you so much knowledge of all of that stuff, and I would highly recommend it, especially if you're going into something like search and rescue or wildland firefighting. You're going to deal with a lot of ICS.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll wait a couple more, maybe a minute.
And any questions about any of these opportunities, just reach out to us. You have our emails. If you don't, ask them before you leave here today, or ask them in the chat if you're on Zoom.
Or you can always email me and I can point you in the right direction, because I know you all have my email.
Right.
Okay, we have everyone. Go ahead and start.
All right, here we go.
Okay, then Andrew, you have some explanations for the follow-up.
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
Just
just
a-
shout from here loud.
Both wildland firefighting and SAR are controlled by blank organized. Great, yes.
Very-
Command.
Someone actually shut down my incident commands.
No, it's not my initials. I wish. but- Is that right? Is that what you're-
They are your initials. Yeah.
There you go. For wildland firefighting, there are canine entities which consist of 6 to 7 certifications to permit use in the field.
So it is
False.
It is false. For search and rescue, there are canine units. Dogs do not fight the fire. Stop that against some people.
All right. Which of the following are not obstacles you may face as a wildland?
Which of the following are not obstacles you may face to the wildland firefighting? There we go. So I worded the question differently for you guys. So yeah, so it's all of them are obstacles you could face.
Next question. The Badass Search and Rescue Facebook page that Andrew Zujak suggested you all check out.
Finally got my cursor.
I was just reading.
There we go.
I'm
Check them
so
out, really
amused.
cool. That was a photo of them, by the way, on that one slide.
Yeah. Nice.
Not Eagle Ambulance.
That's the second one. Check it out.
Yeah.
Probably not.
All right. If interested in applying for wildland firefighting position, when should you think about applying?
Intercepted and applying for a wildland fire.
Intercepted, yes. Got fast typing.
There we go.
Yes.
September to October.
It is the same as,
Same as medical school apps. Apply early for these.
Medical school app's a little bit earlier than
Oh,
that.
yeah, well, same gender. You can apply early. Yeah, don't apply to medical school.
No.
Don't do it. Just wait
Nice
till the
job.
next year.
All right. Last question for the numero uno thing to summarize about wildland firefighting and search and rescue. Number one thing. Summarize the wildland firefighting, search and rescue. Yeah. Okay. Two more. All right. That's right.
Oh, wow.
That's right. Let's see our boards. Sophie, nice job. Ellie, way to go. And Taylor, who also presented. All right.
So I see Sophie's name twice.
Okay, while he figures that out, we'll go on to our next topic, which is next week's meeting. We will have a speaker who's an anesthesiologist.
Is it gonna be on Zoom? Because if you guys leave this campus, I don't blame you for spring break, even though they kind of screwed us there. Did I say that?
All right. And while the Kahoot music is still playing, we will go ahead and go on to our parting message. The most important conversation is the one you have with yourself. And with that, have an amazing weekend and week, and enjoy the couple days off next week before next meeting. It's always good to see you guys, and we're always happy to have you here.
Sophie, you want?
Oh, nice clip art.
Oh.
All right, thank you guys so much.